The Bet That Turned Real, Chapter 1. The Challenge. "I'm telling you, falling in love is a choice," Alex Chen declared, leaning back in her chair at the campus coffee shop. "People act like it's this mysterious force, but it's really just chemistry and proximity." Her best friend Madison rolled her eyes, the late afternoon sunlight catching the purple highlights in her dark hair. "Says the girl who's never actually been in love." "That's because I choose not to be," Alex replied, taking a sip of her iced Americano. As a junior psychology major at Berkeley, she prided herself on her rational approach to relationships. "I could make anyone fall in love with me in a month if I wanted to." "Really?" Tom, their computer science friend, looked up from his laptop with sudden interest. "Anyone?" "Anyone," Alex confirmed confidently. "It's all about understanding human psychology and applying the right principles." Madison's eyes lit up with mischief. "Want to put your money where your mouth is?" Alex sat up straighter. "What did you have in mind?" "A bet," Madison said, grinning. "We pick someone, and you have 1 month to make them fall in love with you. If you fail, you have to..." She thought for a moment. "You have to do all our coding projects for the rest of the semester." "And if I win?" "We'll cover your coffee for the entire senior year," Tom chimed in. "And trust me, the way you drink coffee, that's no small bet." Alex considered it. She was confident in her theory, and free coffee for a year was tempting. Plus, she never could resist a challenge. "Deal, but I get veto power over 3 choices. I'm not about to break up any relationships or cause actual drama." "Fair enough," Madison agreed. She began scanning the coffee shop, her eyes finally landing on someone near the window. "How about him?" Alex followed her gaze to a guy sitting alone, completely absorbed in a book. He had dark, curly hair that fell across his forehead, wire-rimmed glasses, and an intense focus that somehow made him stand out despite his quiet presence. He wore a faded blue hoodie with the sleeves pushed up, revealing forearms covered in what appeared to be paint splatters. "That's Lucas Reid," Tom supplied. "He's in my advanced graphics course, art major, minor in computer science. Brilliant guy, but kind of a loner. I don't think I've ever seen him at any parties or events." Alex studied Lucas with growing interest. He was handsome in an unconventional way, and something about his complete absorption in his book intrigued her. "Any girlfriend? Boyfriend?" "Nope," Tom said. "At least none that anyone knows about." "He tutors at the writing center," Madison added. "My roommate said he's really nice, but super reserved. Basically, he's perfect for this bet. Single, decent person, but definitely not the type to fall in love easily." Alex watched as Lucas absently pushed his glasses up his nose, his lips moving slightly as he read. This could work. He was attractive enough to make the next month pleasant, interesting enough to keep her from being bored, and challenging enough to make her victory impressive. "Okay," she said. "I accept. Lucas Reid is the target." "Terms," Tom said, pulling out his phone to take notes. 1 month starting tomorrow. You have to make him genuinely fall in love with you. Not just attraction or dating, but actual love. How do we verify that?" "He has to say it first," Madison declared, without prompting, "and we need some kind of proof." "I'll record it," Alex said confidently. "But no sharing it anywhere. This isn't about humiliating anyone." They all agreed, and Tom drafted a quick contract on his phone which they all signed. As they worked out the final details, Alex stole another glance at Lucas. He had switched from reading to sketching something in a notebook, his hand moving quickly across the page. "One more thing," Madison said. "You can't tell him about the bet. Not during or after. That's just asking for disaster." Alex nodded, already formulating her strategy. She had studied attraction, had read countless papers on the psychology of love. This was just putting theory into practice. "Deal. Starting tomorrow, Operation Love Story begins." As they gathered their things to leave, Alex couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement. This would be an interesting experiment, if nothing else. She had 1 month to make Lucas Reid fall in love with her, and she was determined to succeed. What could possibly go wrong? Chapter 2. First Contact. Alex spent that evening researching. Her psychology courses had covered attraction and relationship formation, but now she needed specific strategies. She created a detailed document on her laptop. Phase 1. Initial contact and connection. Create accidental meetings, establish common ground, demonstrate value, build intrigue. Phase 2. Deepening bond share. Personal stories, create shared experiences, demonstrate understanding, build trust. Phase 3. Emotional investment. Become integral to daily life. Create meaningful moments, foster dependency, trigger protective instincts. Phase 4. Love activation. Demonstrate vulnerability, create emotional peaks, establish future potential. Trigger confession. Looking at her outline, Alex felt a twinge of guilt. It seemed manipulative when laid out so clinically. But she reminded herself that these were natural processes she was just accelerating. Besides, she had no intention of hurting Lucas. After the bet, she would gradually create distance until things faded naturally. The next morning, Alex arrived at the campus coffee shop early, having learned from Tom that Lucas usually grabbed coffee before his 9 a.m. class. She chose a strategic position near the counter and waited, reviewing her class notes to look naturally occupied. Right on schedule, Lucas walked in. Up close, he was even more interesting looking than she had initially thought. His curly hair was slightly disheveled, and paint stains marked the cuffs of his denim jacket. He had the kind of face that changed completely when he was thinking deeply, which seemed to be most of the time. Alex waited until he had ordered and was waiting for his drink, then made her move. She approached the counter as if to check on her own order, deliberately stumbling slightly as she reached it. Lucas's hand shot out to steady her, quick reflexes surprising them both. "Careful," he said, his voice softer and warmer than she had expected. "Thanks," Alex said, letting embarrassment color her cheeks. "I shouldn't try to read and walk at the same time." She held up her phone with its psychology article clearly visible. His eyes flickered to the screen. "The role of vulnerability in emotional connection," he read. "Interesting topic." "It's for my psychology thesis," Alex explained, seizing the opening. "I'm exploring how authentic connections form in an increasingly digital age." Something in Lucas's expression shifted, a spark of genuine interest. "That's actually relevant to my current project. I'm working on an installation about technology and human interaction." Perfect. Alex hadn't expected to establish common ground so quickly. "Really? I'd love to hear more about that." "Maybe we could—" "Mobile order for Lucas," the barista called out. Lucas seemed to catch himself, his walls visibly going back up. "I should go. I have class." He grabbed his coffee and headed for the door, then paused. "Good luck with your thesis." Alex watched him leave, both frustrated and intrigued. She had glimpsed something in that brief moment of engagement, an intensity, a depth of thought that made her want to know more. But clearly, this would take more effort than she had anticipated. Over the next week, Alex orchestrated several more casual encounters. She discovered that Lucas spent Tuesday afternoons in the art studio, so she started taking a shortcut through the art building to her advanced statistics class. She learned from Tom that Lucas usually worked on coding projects in the computer science lab on Thursday evenings, so she began using that time to study nearby. Each interaction was brief but carefully designed to reveal something about herself, while also learning more about him. She discovered that he was working on combining traditional art with interactive technology, creating installations that responded to human emotion. She let him see her passion for understanding human behavior, her love of classic films, her habit of writing notes in the margins of books. But it wasn't until the following Tuesday that she finally broke through his reserve. She was cutting through the art studio, ostensibly looking for a friend, when she found Lucas alone, staring at a large canvas with obvious frustration. "Something wrong?" she asked, pausing in the doorway. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up even more chaotically. "The piece isn't working. It's supposed to capture how technology both connects and isolates us, but it feels flat. Alex stepped into the studio, drawn by the genuine emotion in his voice. The canvas was covered in a mix of traditional painting and what appeared to be projected digital elements. "Tell me what you're trying to say." He looked at her for a moment, as if deciding whether to trust her with his thoughts. Then the words began to flow. He talked about how social media created the illusion of connection while often deepening loneliness, how screens became both windows and walls, how human touch was increasingly mediated by technology. Alex found herself completely absorbed in his perspective. She offered questions and observations, and soon they were deep in discussion about the nature of authentic human connection. The sun had set by the time they realized how long they had been talking. "I'm sorry," Lucas said, looking embarrassed. "I don't usually... I've never talked about my work like this with anyone." "Don't apologize," Alex said softly. "It's fascinating. You see things differently than anyone I've ever met." He studied her face as if trying to solve a puzzle. Would you be willing to look at more of my work sometime? I could use a perspective from outside the art world." "I'd like that," Alex said, and she was surprised to realize she meant it sincerely. As she walked home that evening, Alex updated her progress notes. Day 8, breakthrough achieved. Subject showing signs of trust and voluntary engagement. Common ground established through shared intellectual interests. Phase 1 proceeding ahead of schedule. But something felt wrong about reducing their conversation to clinical notes. She found herself thinking about the passion in Lucas's voice when he discussed his art, the way his whole face lit up when she understood what he was trying to express. "Focus," she told herself firmly. "This is just a project. Don't get caught up in it." But as she fell asleep that night, her dreams were filled with swirling patterns of paint and light, and the intense look in Lucas's eyes when he talked about genuine human connection. Chapter 3: Deeper Waters. The next few weeks fell into an unexpected rhythm. Alex still orchestrated some of their meetings, but increasingly she found herself genuinely looking forward to their conversations. Lucas had a way of making her question her assumptions, of seeing familiar things from new angles. They fell into the habit of getting coffee after his writing center shifts, discussing everything from art theory to psychology to their favorite books. Alex learned that Lucas had grown up moving frequently due to his father's military career, which explained both his self-contained nature and his fascination with connection and disconnection. "It's easier not to get too attached when you know you'll be leaving," he explained one rainy afternoon, watching droplets race down the coffee shop window. "But then you wake up one day and realize you've built your whole life around keeping people at arm's length." The vulnerability in his voice touched something in Alex. Without thinking, she reached across the table and squeezed his hand. Lucas looked startled, but didn't pull away. "What about you?" he asked softly. "What made you want to study how people connect?" Alex had a prepared answer about academic interest and career goals, but what came out instead was the truth. "My parents had a perfect marriage. At least that's what everyone thought. Then one day, my mom sat me down and explained that they had been quietly divorced for 2 years. They had been pretending to be together because they thought it would be easier for me." She traced the rim of her coffee cup. "I guess I wanted to understand how something that looks real can be completely hollow." Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That's what I'm trying to capture in my installation. How we can be surrounded by connections that feel empty, while real connection sneaks up on you when you least expect it." Their eyes met, and Alex felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't going according to her carefully crafted plan. She was supposed to be the one creating emotional moments, not experiencing them. She needed to regain control of the situation. "Tell me more about your installation," she said, deliberately steering them back to safer ground. But that evening, updating her progress notes proved difficult. How could she objectively document the way Lucas's eyes crinkled when he smiled, or how his hand had felt warm against hers? How could she reduce their growing connection to bullet points and phases? Madison noticed the change in her friend. "You're different lately," she observed during their weekly study session. "More distracted. And you actually put your phone away when you're talking to Lucas." "I'm just committed to winning the bet," Alex defended, but even she heard the uncertainty in her voice. The truth was, Lucas was nothing like she had expected. Behind his quiet exterior was a mind that never stopped questioning, observing, creating. He noticed details others missed. The way light changed the color of leaves, how people's voices shifted when they talked about things they loved, the patterns in seemingly random events. One Saturday, he took her to an interactive art exhibition downtown. Alex watched in fascination as Lucas engaged with each piece, his face lighting up as he explained the technical and artistic elements at play. When they reached a particular installation, a room where visitors' movements created evolving patterns of light and sound, he grabbed her hand excitedly. "Dance with me," he said, pulling her into the center of the space. "What? No, I don't." But Lucas was already moving, their joined movements creating swirling galaxies of light around them. Alex found herself laughing, letting go of her usual self-consciousness as they created ephemeral art with their bodies. When they finally stopped, breathless and grinning, Lucas was looking at her with an expression that made her heart skip. "You're beautiful when you let yourself be free," he said softly. Alex felt herself blushing. This wasn't supposed to happen. She was supposed to be the one creating moments of connection, not getting caught up in them. But increasingly, she found herself forgetting about the bet, losing herself in genuine conversations and shared experiences. The lines between strategy and sincerity began to blur. When she texted Lucas about interesting psychology articles, it wasn't because of her plan. She genuinely wanted to share ideas with him. When she brought him coffee during late-night studio sessions, it wasn't to create dependency. She just hated the thought of him being tired and alone. One night, after they had spent hours talking in the empty art studio, Lucas showed her his sketchbooks. Page after page was filled with studies of hands, faces, moments of human connection. And there, in recent pages, she found herself, laughing over coffee, lost in thought during their discussions, dancing in the light installation. "You've been drawing me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Lucas took the sketchbook gently from her hands. "You have the most expressive face I've ever seen. Every thought and feeling shows in your eyes, your smile." He paused. "At least they do now. When I first met you, it was like you were wearing a mask." Alex felt the blood drain from her face. Did he know about the bet? But Lucas was still talking. "But lately, you've seemed more real, more present, like you're finally letting yourself feel things instead of just analyzing them." The guilt hit her like a physical blow. Here was Lucas, sharing his private thoughts, his art, his vulnerability, while she was playing an elaborate game. She had intended to make him fall in love with her, but somehow she had become the one at risk of falling. That night, she couldn't sleep. She opened her laptop to update her progress notes, but found herself staring at the blank screen. How could she document what was happening when she wasn't even sure herself anymore? Instead of writing notes, she found herself sketching in the margins of her notebook, something she hadn't done since high school. Small drawings of coffee cups, paint-stained hands, swirling lights. Without meaning to, she was creating her own record of moments that felt increasingly precious and increasingly complicated. The bet had 20 days left, but Alex was beginning to wonder who was really being transformed by this experiment. And more importantly, what would happen when the truth eventually came out? Chapter 4. Complications. As October drew to a close, Alex found herself in an increasingly difficult position. The bet's deadline was approaching, but her feelings for Lucas had become hopelessly tangled. Every time she reminded herself this was just an experiment, he would do or say something that made her defenses crumble. Like the afternoon he showed up at her psychology lab, knowing she had a major presentation that day. He brought her favorite coffee and a small sketch he had made, her surrounded by floating books and synapses, looking confident and capable. "For luck," he said, pressing it into her hands. Though you don't need it, you're brilliant. Or the rainy night when they got caught in.